So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with Annie Terrazzo, a visual artist based in Los Angeles.
I am, but I do a fair bit of traveling. And,
Okay,
I do shows around the world.
great. So, I'm here with Annie Terrazzo. Annie, welcome to the Hangout.
Thank you so much for having me.
Great. And how would you characterize the art and the work that you do?
Well, it's mixed media portraiture. I say that it's trash portraiture, but I think it kind of goes beyond that. I like to throw the trash into it because it kind of makes it something that isn't quite as mainstream or as it's not just portraiture. I'm doing it out of this material. I'm making people out of magazines or newspapers or found paper. And I'm basically with the word that I find in the material, I create stories or people out of the material, make faces, objects, things like that. But basically, I'm kind of telling a story. I think I like to say that I'm not that great of a writer, but I'm still a writer in art.
So, how does the newspaper come into it? Could you talk about that process and how you developed it?
Sure. I thought that my career was going to be painting after school, and I spent 6 or 7 years doing mixed media portraiture that was based with acrylic paint. And I after 7 years, I had kind of come to the point where I wasn't getting any better, and I kind of thought, okay, well, what else is there to say in this? And I got really kind of frustrated with myself. And one day I just said, you know what, the painting thing, I'm not that great at it. And so I took my entire studio and I packed it up and I took it to the garbage and, watched the garbage trucks come and take all of my stuff away, which was pretty heartbreaking. And then, for the next 3 or 4 days, I just kind of sat around and thinking, what are you going to do with your life? And it was at that point where I moved from LA to London for a year. And the second that I got to London, I was kind of bombarded with a different perspective. And I was very inspired. And when you get onto the tube there, subway, they hand you free newspapers. And most people just throw them on the ground of the subway. And I just kind of, I don't know, I was just sitting there one day and I was like, I got to do something with it. People are just throwing them on the ground. It's free. And it's got all of these interesting and funny things. And from then on, and I believe that was 2008, I have really kind of tried to communicate through those words. And I've come through a lot of different levels of that because I mean I've been doing it for so long, and you just kind of find different levels in what you can achieve with the paper.
So you find the newspapers, and then what do you do with the newspapers that you find?
Well, I cut them up, and then I make either a collage on the back, or I make a figure or whatever I'm drawing, and then I will put the two together, and then I seal it with tape. That's it's kind of like box tape, but it's museum tape, so it's archival, and then I put gel over it, and then I draw over it again.
Are there any other portions of the newspaper that you look for to use?
You know, it depends on my subject matter. I think anything is fit to play with. But it is just kind of what is the news of the day? What is going to inspire that picture? Because the words have to blend with the picture. Otherwise, what are you doing? I mean, there's this guy that does like Kanye West portraits, on newspaper from the 1800s, and I don't. They're beautiful. I love them, but I don't quite understand what Kanye West has to do with the 1800s. Um, so I think that there's definitely something that to me I have to have the idea, but the words I'm only limited to the words that I can find. So
Now, there's such a photorealistic quality to some of the works that I've seen you do. How do you achieve that? Originally, I thought they were actually photographs. They just look so realistic
it's
to me.
so funny. I've pushed myself so hard to be a photorealistic artist, and now that I know that I can do it, I'm trying to kind of pull myself back from that and find out, okay, I don't want to just draw a picture. I don't think that that's what art is. It has to have some sort of hyper realistic element or some surreal aspect to it. Otherwise, what are you drawing? You could just look at a picture. You could just print out a picture. So I think there's always challenges in art, and I was like I wanted to draw really, really, really well, and now that I can do that, now I kind of want to not draw well. I always want to go back to the beginning when I couldn't draw it that well. So it's all about the things that you kind of set for yourself as an artist.
Did you know that this is always what you wanted to do?
I didn't. I wanted to be an actress for a little while, and I think that that was just because I had a lot of problems. And I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a director. I wanted to be. I think there was something that was definitely interesting to me about characters and stories, and I don't think that I was really good at any of those things. So, but I did love to draw, and my family are artists and jewelers and very, very creative minds. And so I think it is a bit in my blood. But I was always cutting up newspaper. I was always doing that even as a small kid, and I was obsessed with playing with tape. When I was really young, and lo and behold, I still play with tape. So I think it's just kind of, and I mean, when I was in art school, when I was like 15, 16 years old, in high school in art, I was using Prismacolor pencils, and that's what I'm using today. I feel like I've been doing this for my entire life, even though I didn't really know.
So could you walk us through your entire story from when you were a kid and you went to school and you went through all those different phases up until this point?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I have kind of a salacious background. It hasn't always been as good as it is now. When I was growing up, my parents were divorced. My mom was in the sex industry, and she was working. She kind of was a porn star before me when she met my dad, who was a race car driver for Formula One, and so they were wild people. They were crazy, and I think that growing up, I was kind of an afterthought in the shadow of whatever was going on in their heads. But my family was really supportive of me and really looked after me. My aunt was the first person who taught me how to draw, and so there were these bright moments in kind of the dark parts of my parents' lives, and me just kind of going through it. But it did kind of influence me to really think differently, I think. You always say that, oh, if I didn't go through those things, I wouldn't think the way that I do now. But, maybe I wouldn't be an artist, but maybe I'd be a happier person. But I don't know. I think, I think um, growing up in that environment, and I lived in a pretty small town when I wasn't kind of like trotted off to LA or the racetrack or wherever, um, did inspire me to be more creative. And I think I was just always kind of looking for what I was really good at and how my voice basically. And after high school, I decided I was going to go to the academy in San Francisco, and which I didn't really excel at. I think that it was the first time that I had really been on my own, and I had a really hard time trying to figure out who I was beyond my parents' issues, beyond what I had gone through, and and so I was still just kind of like putzing around and being 20 and kind of getting in a lot of trouble, and moved down to LA and kind of just started doing graphic design, which I could go out and party all night and wake up in the morning and do somebody's letterhead, and and it was fine. It wasn't challenging, and it wasn't like, um, but I don't think that I really had a plan. I just kind of was getting through day by day, and then I don't know. I think when I was about 27, I had kind of had enough, and I'd sold a bit of artwork. I was living in a brewery at that time, and I probably sold probably about like 200 pieces of art. They weren't expensive, but I mean, definitely pushing them out and getting them out there. But I was in the kind of like the worst gallery in all of Los Angeles, which I won't name names. But I felt like about when I was 27, and I kind of woke up one day and I wasn't dead, because I always thought I was going to die when I was 27. I kind of went, okay, well, you didn't die. What are you going to do now? And I went, okay, well, I'm really going to push myself and try to make something of myself and be who I really want to be. Um, and I think that was a really big change for me, and I started to take myself more seriously, and really kind of progress. But I don't know. I don't think that I was making the level of art that I was capable of until a couple of years ago, when I really kind of tried as hard as I possibly could. And then I really started seeing things happen.
So what does that entail? What do you mean tried as hard as you possibly could? What did you start doing differently to get to the level of success that you have today?
Well, I think jealousy is a huge motivator. And I was really, really quite jealous of a particular person, one of my friends, who was doing a lot better than I was. And I was like, I don't understand why this is happening. My art is just as good as theirs. What are they doing? And I started to look at what they were doing, and I went, okay, well, how can I get on this? How can I do this? Can I just follow in this person's footsteps and see what they're kind of looking at, and see if I can kind of like latch on. And it's taking the time. It's going to the shows, finding the gallery that you want to be a part of, going to that gallery, finding out who knows the people that are in charge of that gallery, having them introduce you. It's all of these little steps. It's selling online. It's finding the people that connect with your work, whether they be here or in New York or Singapore or London, wherever, but finding them and somehow getting your artwork to them. And it is a lot. It's about the business. It's about how things work. And I think that's where a lot of the stuff that Matt was talking about in his boot camp, where it's about relationships. And that was something that I never understood, but it started to make sense the more that I applied myself.
What do you do when you go to these galleries and you find a gallery that you like and you start to meet people and make those connections? Where does that break happen, or when does that connection get made where they say, okay, well, we'll start showing your work in our gallery?
I think that it it you it definitely happens, and I mean, I can't say that do A, B, and C, you're going to get your work in this gallery. their feelings have to be slightly mutual, and you have to be doing something that they think that they could sell. Um, but like I can just give you an example with Matt Gleason. He came to one of my shows, and I asked him, "Hey, can I take you to lunch one day and talk about maybe doing something?" And he went, "Yeah, sure, you can come and take me to lunch." He's a very cheap date, and and so we go and we have some Vietnamese food, and he's like, "You know what? I have this spot. Why don't you take it?" And I went, "Great, I've got this idea," and he loved the idea, and then it just kind of came together in this great way. But it wasn't something that I calculated, but it was something that Matt was on my list of things to do, you know. That was somebody that I really wanted to work with. So I mean, and there's times where it doesn't work, but you have to let the gallery know what you're doing and make them want you. You know, what are you going to do for the gallery? Well, you know, I have this huge show in London. Isn't that exciting? Ooh, well, ooh, I want something that's happening in London, you know, or whatever. Or, you know, I just sold such and such a thing, or I'm doing this mural. And then by them knowing that, you become more valuable, desirable.
Hey, could you talk about some of your major successes?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that that has happened to me so far is that through the Kill Your Selfie show in LA, on the heels of that, I got a major solo exhibition in London for September, which will be you know, the whole floor of a gallery in Notting Hill, which is kind of like the coolest, trendiest place to be as of now. But in the past, I got put in an exhibition, a permanent exhibition at the Thompson Hotel, right next to a Chuck Close. So I'm
Wow.
close to a close, and I'm pretty excited about that.
Now, did you reach out to those galleries and that hotel proactively, or did they notice your show in Los Angeles and they reached out to you?
Um, the debut contemporary, which is where I'm going to do my show in the UK, I had been working with them for the last 6 months, and they've been actively selling my work on their website, and I had done some group shows, but not until I did the LA Art Show and had Kill Your Selfie and was in the Huffington Post and the LA Weekly did they go, okay, well this girl is on track, and we're going to be the next ones that get her. So that kind of happened, and the Thompson Hotel in Chicago was brought to me by a company called the Indie Walls, and they were a huge part of me breaking through, I think, and people taking me seriously was it, because they do a lot of exterior venues, they do a lot of hotels, they do a lot of offices and things like that, meeting places and things where they will buy the work permanently, or do prints in all of the hotel rooms. And so that just ups your game, you know, to a whole nother level. Because I tell people when they ask me, you know, what are you doing to try and like, make ends meet as an artist? I'm like, there's a whole world outside of the galleries. There's a whole world of places that you can get your art. And that's really important to think about when you're establishing a brand.
And you're working with a PR company, is that right?
Yes.
Has that been big for you, or how does that process start?
It's a
How do
whole
you?
other world. Yeah. Heidi from Hijinks is really multi-talented at what she does. But it is something that this is my first, you know, foray into PR, and it's, you know, I think that you need to kind of, even though you do have this person behind you, you can't rest on them. It still has to be, I'm doing this, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing that, and, you know, what can you do with that? You know, because if you don't have anything to bring to that person, what can they do? they can't do anything. It's all kind of based on the work that you do, and then giving it to them. And in my opinion, but ask me in like a year, and I'll probably tell you something totally different.
At which point did you say, okay, well, I'm gonna go hire this PR company to progress my career?
It was just the Kill Your Selfie show. I had a bit of money to put into the show, and Matt suggested Heidi as she does the PR for Coagula, and I just thought, let's give it a shot. Let's see what she can do. And we didn't have that much time. We only had about a month and a half, which is not a long time to we weren't able to do any kind of she calls it something, but it's like long, things that go to print. Um, but for the time that we had, I thought that it was amazing. It was really well attended. We were able to pull the second event out of our butts, where I had my our panel discussion, but like we put that together in a couple of days, and we still had like 40 people come, which I was like, great, that's awesome. And Greg Escalante came to the show, who I don't know if you know, he does Corpo Gallery, and he started Juxtapose magazine, and so I mean, those were huge wins for me. And beyond that, she's introduced me to a couple of people, but I'm waiting to see how things develop. My show isn't in London till September, so we have a bit of a shot to see what we can do with a longer amount of time for a show.
So once you start working with a company like that or a PR firm like that, do you continue indefinitely to work with them?
No, I think you can stop anytime. If you're not happy, you're not happy, and they're not going to do anything if they're not happy. But I mean, Heidi is my manager, and so really right now she's kind of digging up shows. She is kind of, submitting me for stories and things like that. But and kind of giving me good advice. And it's nice, I mean, as an artist, to have somebody else there. And what do you think about this? What do do you think this is the right direction for me? Do you think I should do that show? I agree, and I don't think that's, what I should do. So it's nice to have somebody to talk to about your career and give you some good advice. But again, I just think it's up to you to do the work and have them do something for you, because it's just not going to come out of the air. But I mean, I'm not in a long-term contract with them or anything.
Let's talk about the storytelling elements behind your work and the themes behind your work. How do you develop those?
I think that I'm really bad at communicating my feelings, and I think a lot of times the best work will come out of me trying to express something that I can't say with words. And so a lot of it is kind of based on my experiences and my perspective, which is probably why most of them are women. And or sometimes I just want to say something about human nature or human beings or the internet or things like that. But mostly, I would say my number one pinpoint, what is my stuff about? It's about how people communicate with other people.
What would you say is different about your process from other artists?
Well, there's a few other people, like I kind of said, were doing newspaper things. And we all kind of have our very different ways of approaching it. I'm trying to preserve it, I think, in a way that no one else is trying to do it. I don't cover it with a giant thing of, resin, which I think kills it. But I'm trying to, because newspapers are just not going to be around. I think everybody knows that. Every couple of months we hear about another magazine that's not being printed anymore. They're not worth anything online. eBay, you can get like a stack of Life magazines for no money, like $1. They will give them to you. Um, so they're not valuable, but there's information in them. There's history. There are things to be learned. There's jokes. There's all of these things about our culture and our lifestyle and who we are. And so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to preserve them in my own unique way through my stories, through my people, through my art, and hopefully that does make me different. And I do think that I have a slightly different perspective and something to say than a lot of other people. And most of the people I know that are doing newspaper art are men, so that does make me different because I'm a girl.
Why do you think that is?
I think that there's a lot of male artists. I don't know why. Every single newspaper magazine artist I know is a man, though.
How did you come up with the concept of kill your selfie?
Well, that was kind of funny because I kind of have a list of potential good series, collections, kind of things to play with, and I'm not like great at Instagram, but I do like to kind of scroll through people's pictures and look at things and kind of distract myself. And one picture that I just saw had this hashtag that was kill your selfie, and I was like, oh my goodness, it's really funny. And I looked up on the internet, and it's a thing, it's kind of like there's a website devoted to the hashtag, and it has basically all of the selfies that are terrible, or funny or whatever. And I just thought that it was a powerful statement. And not that I wouldn't think that I wanted to do a show about selfies because who would want to see that? But I think that when I told Matt the idea and I told Heidi the idea, they got really excited about the PR angle. And it was, they were right. It was something that people really started to remember and liked. They came to the show just because of the show title. So, and I was like, oh, so that's how this works. It was kind of an interesting foray into ideas that are marketable.
Did you create the work before you came up with a concept, or you came up with a concept and then you created the work for the show?
It was all after. I had my meeting with Matt in November, and right after that, I kind of made the first piece, and then went, okay, here's the first piece. How about kill your selfie? And he loved it, and then I had the daunting task of making a show about selfies, and which I seriously sat in my studio for like a week staring at a blank wall. I was like, oh shit. I don't know if I want to make a show about selfies. But it turned out that the show wasn't about selfies. It was about ourselves, and it was about why do people do this? Why do people have this need to take a picture of themselves? And kind of stemming through, like, it was kind of making that the through line rather than drawing people going like this, because I didn't think that would be, very good.
It seems like a lot of the subject matter, or it seemed like the folks in your work were characters unto themselves. Where do these characters come from exactly? Like, who are they?
Well, I would say, someone once told me a great artist said that every good artist paints themselves. But, and I would say that all of the pieces are versions of me, versions of myself, something within that. But, the girl that has no face with the blonde and the big boobs is obviously a ripoff of every Marilyn that ever was. On every, version of Marilyn that we've seen from 1960 to present day. And then, we have the Barbie elements. Those are obviously, versions of some kind of characterization of the female beauty element. And and then you kind of have the more kind of surreal things that I've kind of just taken things from all of these other elements in the world and kind of come up with this idea and how to kind of mash them all together. But there weren't specific people except for the Marilyn, I would say, and the Barbie.
So you see these characters in your head, you have a concept, and you start sketching them, then? Is that how that works?
Pretty much, yeah. Or I'll come up with this idea and then it'll just kind of take form, and it won't always be the form that I originated. Sometimes it's completely different, but I always just kind of try and just go with wherever it's gonna go.
Who would you say are your influences? Where do you find inspiration?
Well, the first artist that I was ever really aware of was Andy Warhol. And so I think that was, I remember my mother taking me to the bookstore and going to the art section. She brought this book. It was like, "Ooh, look, this is Andy Warhol," and I must have been about 7, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh," and that was something that really kind of, I'll always remember that moment. And so I think that was a big one. I think as far as artists go, there's many many artists that I'm really admire and I kind of aspire to be like. But I think Andy was the main.
How any books or movies or music that you find particularly inspiring?
Yeah, well, I mean, I read a lot. I read all of the magazines and all of the newspapers that I can, and so that really does influence me a ton. And it can be papers that I would have no right reading. I mean, things that have nothing to do with me. And I always find that quite fascinating to look from other people's perspectives. And I always have to, like, whenever I'm doing a piece, I will hand pick like 100 songs, sometimes 50 or whatever, songs that I will play while I'm making the music, whether it be like, for one instance, I did a show in Miami, and they were all of these pinup girls, and I was listening to a lot of gangster rap because, to be honest, like it was so syrupy and so pretty, and all of these girls were like, and I had to have something else in my head other than that tutti fruity kind of nonsense. And so it'll either be like the antithesis of, what I'm trying to say, or it'll be the exact opposite, as far as music. But I find music is like the keystone of my creative juices.
So do you always play music while you create your work?
I have to, or I think about it. It's the only way that I can stop thinking and just kind of like bash around and play and listen to the music and feel the music and then like draw. But yeah, if there's no music and it's just me talking to myself, then nothing happens. Nothing good ever happens to me sitting there talking to myself.
So you mentioned gangster rap. Is there another type of music that you predominantly play, or does it just change depending on your mood?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the piece that I'm making. I like a lot of like indie kind of funk. I like mashups. I like fun music. I also like a lot of classical music. I kind of listen to all things. I think, I mean, if I had to pick my favorites, it would be David Bowie and the Arctic Monkeys. Are like, but I mean, I don't even really listen to that music when I work because that's, I don't know. I mean, maybe we'll see. Maybe there's a David Bowie picture in my future, and I'll just jam to David Bowie for like 7 hours.
What would you say are some of the challenges you've had to overcome to get to where you are?
Mostly just myself. Um, I think that once I started to really become truthful, and unashamed of what I wanted to say, unashamed of who I am as an artist, what I have to say, only then I felt truly free to express myself. And I don't care who doesn't like it. I will go up to anyone and tell you about my work, because I believe in it and I believe in myself. But I didn't for a really long time.
Along that same track, what piece of advice do you wish somebody gave you when you first started out?
That's a hard one. I think, it's something that Matt Gleason taught me, and I'll have to paraphrase it. I mean, you might know it. I don't know if he taught you that one, but it was spelling of artists, and every single letter said a different thing. But basically, it was associations were really important, relationships. What was T? T was tightwad. Tightwad. Don't be a tightwad. Um, Antenna. You don't have an antenna. You're not, the greatest gift. Just make the work. But I think, yeah, relationships, not being a tightwad, you don't have an antenna. Those things are the most important things that you can think of as an artist. When you're going to go meet somebody, think about how you can, what you have to offer, how you could build your brand, all of these things. That is, you have to make the work, but unless you go out there and you share it with other people, nobody's going to care. The world is so different now from when I started as an artist. You can go put your art on Saatchi, and people from China can buy it. That was not a thing a couple of years ago, and so I think now we have an opportunity to be more connected and sell our wares in ways that weren't even imaginable 10, 15, 30 years ago. And you have to take advantage of that if you're going to be successful.
Could you go through that acronym again one more time, just as
Oh
a quick
man,
summary?
do you know what it is? Because I don't want to mess it up. Okay, A is for associations. You have to be associated with things that represent your brand. You don't want to be associated with anybody that isn't worth your time. R is for relationships, which are different than associations. Relationships is the building blocks of you and galleries and friends and having all of these people together in your camp that will help you move through the art world. T is tightwad, don't be a tightwad. I is innovation. And innovation is only brought to you through destroying something. And that is how you become an innovator, is when you destroy something. And S is for sycophant, don't be one. And T is for Terrazzo. I
Nice.
don't know.
What are your future goals?
It's funny. I was kind of thinking back to where I started, and I've kind of accomplished all of the goals that I had set out for myself a couple of years ago, which is amazing and feels really good. But I think for the second half of this second leg of my tour, I feel like it's not really about goal. It's about seeing people and places that you want to work with and galleries that you think, God, man, that my stuff would look so good in there. That person I know could help me. This website, this thing. It's about these little tiny things, and it's like chip in the wall. And one day there just isn't going to be a wall, and then there's something else. But it's not like I have these big things. Oh my God, if I got into La Luz de Jesus, my life would be complete. that happened, and then I was like, oh shit, it's just another show. It's just these things of these people, these moments, these tiny little goals rather than this main goal.
Do you work on your art full time?
I do. I try and do as much as I possibly can, but there's only so much that your hand will do. And I find that if I do it every day, I'm not good. I find that it's almost better to be like really yearning to do this idea and then like attacking it rather than this slow process. It's more of like I binge and I purge, or I kind of like I like it to be more that. But everybody's different as far as their creative thing. I don't think anything is better than one or the other.
So how do you make a living off of purely art? Are you constantly selling your works then?
Yeah, I mean that's a hard thing because I mean you should literally be working all day and then going to shows all night, and that's hard. It's hard, and I find that internet sales are great, print sales are great, going to external venues will always be something that you're just like, oh, I got this check in the mail. That's awesome, But you just kind of have to always make the opportunity. You have to keep on getting it out there and making it seen and prints and all that kind of stuff.
Have you always been a full-time artist, or did you work any side jobs before you transitioned into that?
Yeah, I did a graphic design job for a good 6 or 7 years, which it paid the bills, but wasn't very much fun.
So how did you make that jump then to saying, I'm going to quit this job and I'm just going to do art full time?
It was kind of a scary moment, but it was the moment that I went to live in the UK, and I kind of had this little part-time job over there to make money, but um, it was just something that you kind of gave up. I was tired of doing it. It wasn't really going to make that big of a difference in my life, and luckily I've been fortunate enough to kind of have moments of getting a bit of money and then going, okay, well, let's put this into my art career, and that's a sacrifice, and that's the tightwad kind of thing that comes up with the artist statement is if you have a bit of money, put it into your art and see what happens. If nothing happens, then don't ever wait for a little bit, but see, I mean, that was kind of the PR thing with Kill Your Selfie, was that I was able to kind of take that jump, take that leap of faith, and it did pay off.
Did you create a big savings then that you knew you could support yourself with for a few months before you made that leap? Or were you already
Yeah.
having sales of your works before you made that transition?
Well, I had had a couple of good months of sales, and this opportunity came up to live in London, and I just kind of jumped on it and said goodbye to graphic design, um, and I was able to make work pretty much right after getting into to London and start a whole another chapter. And everybody there was really excited about what I was doing and kind of bought the first ones. Even though I don't think that they were very good at that point, but yeah, even transitioning from one type of art to another, I was still able to find an audience over there and sell them fairly quickly and keep making art.
Do you feel like social media plays a big part in your success, or is that sort of just a side thing?
I think it is inevitable with success. The more people that are able to find you, the more people that are able to search something that they weren't even kind of looking, didn't even know about you, and find you and go, oh my God, that's exactly what I want. that's social media right there. A friend of a friend bought one of my pieces. All of those things kind of come into play for your success.
I noticed on your Facebook stream that you travel to all these different cities and you have all these different shows in all these different places. How did that happen?
I like to travel. I like to take opportunities. Somebody says, "Oh, you want to do this?" I go, "Yeah," and then I make it happen. I think traveling, right now I'm in Louisiana and it's crazy. Like any thought that I had of Louisiana was way better than any thought that I have now because it's just mental here. Um, but I'm gonna go to Dallas. I'm gonna go to Arkansas. I'm gonna go to Memphis. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna see whatever is going on here, and I'm gonna look at people and I'm gonna digest their stories. I'm gonna read newspapers and things like that. But it's all information, and I think that as an artist, writers write what they know. Artists, draw what they know or paint what they know. And I think that that's important for me to live life, have experiences, and never say, "Oh, I can't do that because I've got something else to do." It's always like, "That sounds like a crazy idea. Let's do it."
Where do you find these opportunities? Is there a resource that you use, or do they usually find you?
Um, it's just galleries contacting me. I mean, I think Saatchi is a great way for galleries to find other artists. I've had most of my galleries or external uh, places to show art have always contacted me via, "Oh, I saw you on Saatchi." And so that's kind of a portal. And a lot of just like, friends of friends, artist friends. "Hey, there's a thing going on. I know you do crazy, outlandish things. You want to go live in Louisiana?" "Sure." And it's, you got, yeah, I mean, I've always been a really nomadic person, and the art scene is great in Louisiana, in New Orleans at least, and Dallas has got like a big convention. Why not check it out? See, who knows where I'm going to find the people that like my art? I think LA is very limiting. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's pretty great that you've been able to just break away from the 40-hour work week and focus primarily on your art. That's
I
awesome.
do a lot of commissions and they pay a lot. I mean, I've been lucky in my life where any time that I was kind of down on my luck, something kind of came at me. So I've been really lucky on that level of kind of just self-preserving. But it makes you work harder. It makes you work 10 times harder because you don't have that safety net.
Yeah,
And once you
yeah.
make the kind of jump from like, yeah, I'm doing really well. I'm doing, I'm on this track, then you can hop off, but it doesn't mean that you can kind of be like, "Oh, I just can't do that today," because you got no more days left. When you're sick, you're working. When you're, it doesn't matter because you're just, oh, it's full-time hustle.
What kind of commissions are you doing? Like people say, "Hey, I want you to create a portrait of me," and you do that, or
The worst, like it'll be anything. Like there'll be one of my pieces that they want, and they'll be like, "Okay, well, I like these two girls, but could you put a boy in the middle?" And you're like, "Yes." And they'll be like, they'll never get, accept it. They'll come back and they'll be like, "Now I'm gonna do it." You know. So
is it the same style? You take the newspaper and then you start sketching your client's image on that?
I've had people that they wanted me to do them, giant versions of them in their house.
Oh, okay. Do they ever ask you to do something totally different? Like they say, okay, I don't even like newspaper and stuff. I want you to work on just this canvas that I bought, and I want you to paint me or to draw me. Does that ever happen?
Yeah, and I do it every once in a while, but again, I mean, not something I put on Facebook or anything. Um, and there's a lot of artwork that I don't put on Facebook because it's not, because that's where I'm building my brand, you know. So,
How do people even
yeah.
find out like, oh, Ani Terrazzo, she can do my portrait and stuff? I mean, I'm sure is that posted somewhere on the site, or they just look at your work and they say, hey, this girl, she does really badass portraits. I think I'm gonna hire her to do mine.
That's exactly what happens. That's exactly what happens. And I think, yeah, there was one person that emailed me that was like, oh, it's my dad's 60th birthday. Can you do a portrait of him? And I was like, well, I pretty much do only newspaper stuff. So would your dad want to be on newspaper or whatever? And then they never kind of got back to me. But yeah, I mean, I think you can just go, let's just look up portraits artists, and and then they go, oh, I like that girl. Maybe they can draw my dad. I don't know. Not something that I would ever do, so.
Very cool. What are you working on now?
Well, I have a meeting on Monday to discuss my ideas for the London show, and hopefully starting Monday I can get to work because there's going to be a lot of pieces for that. And in between that, I would kind of had this kind of just mini series going, and it's probably about 3 or 4 pieces, kind of lasting designer brands and kind of poking fun at advertisements and things like that, but they're all done with very recent publications, which is something that I kind of I feel like I've been using a lot of vintage material for a while, and I kind of like give it a rest, you know. Let's go for another perspective, and so I've kind of been cutting up these newer magazines, recent issues, and seeing what I can kind of pull out and do something a little more modern and futuristic.
Do you have any work that you can show us?
Oh, yeah. What did I do? Let me go grab it. It's not
Okay.
done. I'm sure you don't want pieces that's done. I've made the dining room of this house my studio, which is kind of funny. But so this is what I was saying that I was doing as far as kind of um, the more modern take on my art, and so I had a ID magazine from 2008, and I was kind of just ripping it up and seeing where it took me, and so this is what I've made.
Oh, very nice.
And it's a woman who has jewelry coming out of her nose. And it's kind of just something I was kind of playing around with. It's just going to be a little mini collection, mini series.
So what's the story behind that picture?
What? Well, I think, like I said, I spent most of my 20s being slightly out of control,
Oh,
and
partying.
and so I think I gave up drugs to kind of focus on my career, and look where I am now. But yeah, I think that there's like this huge uh, kind of idealism in luxury brands and designer kind of thing that is almost like drugs. And I kind of thought, oh, it would be so funny if there was like a girl that was like snorting gold, and then it just kind of went from snorting gold to an idea of having actual jewelry coming out of person's face. And I don't know. I mean, it kind of morphed into that when I was drawing it. And so yeah, that was kind of the idea behind it.
Cool.
I've gone through my entire life.
Yeah, it was very informative, very intriguing. You have such a colorful background.
Yes, that's one word to use for.
Do you roll up all those life experiences and have express those through your art, you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's where a lot of it comes from. And I think that, my art used to be a lot more angry. And it was because I was a lot more angry. And now I'm a little more sympathetic and a little more thoughtful. And I think that comes with age and experience. But yeah, I mean, the pieces are me, everything that I think, my interpretation, and I mean, that's what I hope makes them interesting and special, is that you're getting a little bit of something that is a little strange.
So where can people find you online? Facebook, Twitter, your website?
Yeah, I'm Annie Terrazzo, Terrazzo, on Facebook, and Twitter is Annie Terrazzo. My website is detritus-art.com, and I think I own AnnieTerrazzo.com. I just haven't done anything with it yet, but I will. It's on my list of things to do.
Thanks, Annie. Well, that's the end of our interview.
Thank you
I
so
really
much for
appreciate
having
your
me.
time.
Thank you.
That's our show for today. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, be sure to send me an email or visit our site at makephotoart.com.